I won a parental lottery, really. I was blessed with an incredible father. So here are the lessons that I took away from my father, and hope you'll benefit from them as well. One of the biggest gifts my parents gave me is they believed in me. I grew up in a Soviet Russia where the environment often been unkind. I would come home and my parents always showed me love, and they always tell me and show me that I can achieve anything, that I'm special, that I have to put work into it. There is no barriers I can't overcome. I have found that to be one of the biggest gifts because in life I faced a lot of obstacles, and that believe in me gave me the fuel, gave me the energy, the confidence to overcome those obstacles. That's one lesson. So as a parent today, I try to instill the same confidence in my kids. Tell them that they can achieve anything. Now, this is tricky, and this is very, very important. You can't just tell your kids that they're special and they'll achieve anything, okay? They have to put the work into it as well. When you tell kids you're a genius, sometimes they think, well, all I have to do is just be there and great things will happen to me. That's not what I'm saying. I think what my parents did, they said, I'm special, but you do have to put the hard work. That's one lesson. Another lesson was, and this is kind of one of my favorite childhood stories. I was 5 years old. My father picked me up from the kindergarten, and the kindergarten teacher told him that I don't know, I messed something up. I did not behave well. I remember we walked from the kindergarten home, and we get home, and my father kind of kindly looks at me and says, listen, I bought you this truck. There's this beautiful yellow truck in front of me, and he says, I bought it for you, but you didn't behave well in the kindergarten. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put it right here. You can see it, but I trust you that for the next 5 days, you're not gonna play with it because you didn't behave well. But I know that I can trust you. And in 5 days, it's yours. I tell you this happened 45 years ago, and I still remember this as if it was yesterday. Because I don't think that feeling that somebody trusts me unconditionally, that they're not gonna hide it from me, that it's up to me just to behave in an honorable way, that was such an incredible lesson. And that actually, I think I used it with my kids since, actually. So that was another lesson, is that basically in relationship, either being your kids, your friends, your colleagues, you always start with trust, and you show it to them. And what may happen actually, that it may change that person's behavior to be worthy of your trust. That's another lesson. My father always, whenever we traveled, he would take us to art museums. Or we would go, when we traveled to Santa Fe, we would go to galleries. It took me a while to understand the benefits. What are the benefits of going to museums? What's the benefit of art? Well, one of the benefits, and it really took me a long, long time to get this, is that when you go to a museum, when you look at the painting, you actively looking for beauty. It develops this muscle where you start looking for beauty everywhere, not just in museums. You walk in the street and there's a light hitting a brick in a certain way and it creates a shadow, and you notice it. You notice it because by looking at art, you develop that muscle. That's the gift my father gave to me. He also gave it to my kids because we would do it together. And even today, my kids, I noticed my 17-year-old daughter Hannah, we were sitting in the coffee shop, and she was paying attention to little things, how beautiful the design of the coffee shop was. We are given so many minutes in this life. We can go through this life and look under our feet and see the different shades of gray, or we could mindfully look around and notice the beauty that's around us. And that's what art does. So that's another gift my father gave me. Another thing he did was he showed me what good parenting looks like. My father and I had a very special relationship because it was more than just a kind of father-son relationship. It was a true friendship. We traveled together all the time. We would go for a walk all the time. Several times a week I would stop by his house and we would have breakfast. He would come over to our house for Friday night dinner. He told me one time that the relationship he had with his father was a good relationship, but it was not very close. And he wanted to have a close relationship with his kids. And that's exactly what we had. We had a very close friendship relationship. And that's a relationship, hopefully, I'm having with my kids right now as well. So he was very present. When we were together, he was there. He was not looking at his phone. He was there, he was paying attention, he was having a conversation with you. That's another lesson I learned from him, to be a present parent. When I was writing my book, at that time, I didn't have a title. My working title for that book was Student of Life. Later, it was named, I think the name was taken, so we named it Soul in a Game. I want to go through this life as a student of life. And when I think of student of life, I think of my father. This is a person who was always learning, no matter how old he was. He had the same curiosity at 80 that when he was 8. So it's a true story. When he was 73, 75 years old, at this point he was been painting for probably 70 years. I mean, he was painting since he was 5 or 6 years old. And he was an accomplished artist. He had his paintings in art museums around the world. He would still take master classes from other artists he admired. This is a person in his 70s. Another story is that my father moved to the United States when he was 58. It's very difficult to learn a new language at this age. So my father had a tremendous vocabulary, but he was very shy. When it came to conversational English, he was very shy. So in his 70s, he enrolled into community college to study English. Just imagine, he was probably the oldest student that community college ever saw. So this is a person who is always curious. And here's the thing, if you are in a student of life mode, then the life actually becomes more interesting because there is always something you can learn from this life. I want to go through life as well as a student of life. I always want to learn. And by the way, this is what's great about investing in general, because you learn something every single day. If you allow yourself, if you are in a student of life mode, you can learn something all the time. And so that was an incredibly important lesson I learned from my father. When we grew up in Murmansk, Russia, my father was a professor at university. That was one of the most important universities in the city. He taught electrical engineering for 28 years. He was incredibly respected. He had a job he absolutely loved. He was adored by people. He was well known in the city. When we were invited to come to the United States in 1991, my father basically made a very selfless act. He gave up certainty of a good life in Murmansk and traded it for uncertainty of what he's going to face at 58 years when he moves to the United States. And he did this for the certainty that his kids will have a better life. What's important to understand is that at that time, Soviet Union was falling apart. You had no idea what Russia is going to look like. Is it going to be a dictatorial regime like we have today? Or is it going to be like democracy that it was for like 6 or 7 years afterwards? It was a given that there was a very high chance that the life for his kids, if he stayed in Russia, would not be good. And I remember at that time, my father read this article to us, that it was an essay by a professor from Moscow University who moved to Brooklyn. And he ended up working as a taxi driver because he needed to make enough money to pay for his dental work. And I remember my father reading to us, and I'm sure in the back of his mind, he was thinking that could be my future. I'm going to go from being this respected professor to be a taxi driver. And he still took this incredible leap, knowing that that could be a possibility because how much he loved his kids. By the way, this selflessness, you could see this throughout his life. When we came to the United States, my stepmom, who at the time was 54, worked for a hotel doing housekeeping. And my father would come later in the day and help her to do beds and clean rooms so she could take a break. She didn't ask him for that. He just did this because he was a very loyal husband and a friend. That selflessness, that loyalty, that's a very important lesson my father taught me. Another one is, it's kind of interesting. I never thought bravery could be taught or could be trained, but I guess it can be. Both my parents, my mom and my father, were ice swimmers. So I have to explain what it means. So imagine this, Murmansk is located above Arctic Circle. So if you look at Norway, look at the highest tip of Norway, that's where Murmansk is. Okay, so imagine it's 35 degrees outside, negative 35 degrees outside. You have a frozen lake, people around you are wearing burqas and hats and mittens, and you have these people undress to their trunks and go into the ice water. That's what my parents did. So that's what ice swimming. Now, here's an interesting story from my father's life. I remember I was ditching school and I came home for lunch. I'm going back to school and I see that there's smoke coming out of the apartment of our neighbors below us. And this neighbors had 7 kids. And I run upstairs to my father. My father runs downstairs. He breaks the door. He goes in, and this is the apartment is in flames and smoke. 4-bedroom apartment. He goes into every single room, checks it if there are any kids there, finds 2 kids under the blankets, brings them out, and saves their lives. So 2 human beings are alive today because of him. Here's an interesting insight I have. This is speculation on my side. He wanted to go into this burning apartment as much as all my other neighbors. However, whenever he would go into ice water, by the way, I experience the same fear when I go into cold shower. You have this anxiety because you're about to do something you don't want to do. You force yourself to do something you don't want to do. As my father would say it in Russian, doing through the feeling of I don't want to, okay? So when my father every single time overcame that emotion of fear actually of going into ice water, okay, he trained himself doing things that he didn't want to do. Okay, so I'm sure that day our neighbor's apartment was engulfed in smoke and fire. He had the same fear come up, but he trained himself to do things he didn't like, he did not want to do.